Greetings everyone, Craig Hester here with r2awatches.com, and thank you for joining us as we continue on our journey through all the watches that are available at r2awatches.com. If you are watching this on YouTube, be sure and hit like and subscribe and ring that bell so you get those early notifications. A lot of times the watches we put up on these videos, there really aren't that many that we have available, and they may go away before you even get a chance to know about it if you don't get those early notifications. If you are watching this on Facebook, be sure and join the closed group Vostok Europe Timepieces. Now, don't let the name fool you. We talk about all the watches that are available at r2awatches.com in that group, not just Vostok Europe. And that includes today's brand, which is Sturmanskie, the first watch in space on the wrist of Yuri Gagarin. Today we are talking about one of my favorite Russian watches, certainly one of my favorite Sturmanskie watches of all time, and that is the Sturmanskie Ocean. Today we are sharing a reissue of the 1976 Sturmanskie Ocean, which is now in stock at r2awatches.com, or at least at the time of recording of this video. That probably won't last that long because only 200 of them were made for the world. This is a special watch, guys. I know I say that a lot of times. I talk about the specialness of our different watches, and of course they're all kind of like babies to me, or my, and I love them all and I get excited about all of them. But I got to tell you that a chance to own a Sturmanskie Sturmanskie Ocean reissue of the 1976 here in 2020 is a pretty amazing experience, because this has so many things about it that make it immediately collectible and such a rare and special timepiece. Before I get into the history, and there is a rich history behind this watch, I am going to quickly go over the specs of the watch so you know what you're talking about here, and then I'm going to delve in more into the history of the watch and the backstory. First of all, this is a 40mm timepiece. So I'm going to go ahead and do my normal thing here where I check it out with the caliper. And sure enough, it's right there at 40mm. And let's see how thick it is. We are looking at about 14mm thick. So this is a much more traditionally sized watch along the lines of the Yuri Gagarin watches, which are also 40 or 42mm. This is not a large watch by any means, certainly not by today's standards. This would be a much more traditional size watch. But while I'm talking about that, I'm going to quickly show it on the wrist so you can get an idea of how it looks. Because of the way the case is designed and because of the internal bezel, it actually doesn't wear that small, even though it's a 40mm. I have about a 7.5-inch wrist, and you can see that that does fill my wrist pretty well. So it is by no means does it wear small. But if you're somebody who is into the more traditional sized watches, and you're not so much someone who is going to pick up the bigger watches, this is definitely for you. But I want to say to my guys out there who regularly collect the larger watches, whether it's, say, the Stingray from Sturmanskie or other watches from Vostok Europe, which tend to be pretty large watches, don't let size be an issue on this one, because this watch is so important to Russian horological history to have one of these in your collection, even if it's one you put away and you never wear. This is something you really do want to own in the Ocean Sturmanskie. It is that important. It is that special of a watch. Again, this is a reissue of the 1976 Sturmanskie Ocean. Now, I want to be clear that it is not exactly like. There are some slight changes. There are some updates, minor changes, but for the most part, you're looking at watches here that really do match the original 1976 issue. Some of the other specs: it is sapphire crystal. It is, of course, surgical grade stainless steel. I love the etching on the case back, particularly on the blue with the anchor with the star in the center. That is just such a really great look on the back of this watch. This is all Cyrillic, so of course, and like all Sturmanskies, it is hand assembled in Moscow, Russia. Everything about this is, as I like to say, is about as Russian as it gets, guys. If you are into Russian history, if you're into Russian horology, if you're into this, you want to have an Ocean in your collection. Let me just see what some of the other basic specs here. We do have an internal rotating bezel. This allows for you to have a secondary time zone. But the biggest feature of this particular watch, which I guess you could argue of any watch, because without a movement, a watch is nothing but a dial with hands stuck in one place, but is the movement on this. This is the 3133, the 31 caliber Poljot movement is in this watch. Now, that movement is no longer made, and that's an important thing to note when you're talking about picking this watch up, because that makes it immediately collectible. Poljot went out of business in the early 2000s. The movement manufacturing was taken over by Mactime for a while, and eventually the entire movement factory that built the 3133 movements was mothballed and no longer was building these movements. And these are new old stock movements. Now I want to be clear, these are fully restored movements. They actually take them, they tear them down completely, they do it with an acid wash, and they have watchmakers hand assemble every movement in Moscow. So this is about as serious a timekeeping as you can get in terms of a watchmaker being involved in what you're going to be wearing on your wrist. And it's important to note that, because that means that when you get the watch, you're going to be getting a solidly functioning 31 caliber movement, even though the movement is no longer made. Also important to point out here, we do have a 2-year North American warranty. And of course, Sturmanskie has kept a cache of parts. The watch is repairable. I want to make sure nobody has any concerns about that. The 31 caliber movement, which is what followed actually this movement came out at the same time that the Ocean came out in 1976, following the Strela collection, which means arrow in Russian, which of course is the watch that Alexei Leonov wore in the first human spacewalk. This is the 31 caliber movement, which was really the staple of Russian watch manufacturing. It's important to note, this is a mechanical manual wind movement. This does not have a rotor. This is not going to wind with the movement of your wrist. You're going to have an intimate relationship with this watch if you wear it every day, because you're going to need to wind it every day for it to run. Of course, obviously I have these wound and I have them running. I just activated the chronograph so that you can note, like most chronographs, the actual sweep second hand, the long second hand, is the one for measuring elapsed time in the chronograph, and the subdial second on the bicomplex here on the right is the one that is your continuous second hand that is keeping up with the regular timekeeping. And then over there on the left is I've got them backwards. It's the one on the left is your continuously second hand, and then the one on the right is your summing action up to 60 minutes. And again, you've got the internal rotating bezel for a secondary time zone. And of course, this does have the date. I do want to point out, like all Russian timepieces with the Russian movements, whether they were the Poljot or the Vostok, the date is changed by moving past midnight. You saw that the date changed in the window, then you toggle back a little ways, then you go back past midnight, and the date will change again in the window. There is no quick set date position on the crown. That is just one of the anachronisms and a part of what makes this such a cool watch, because of the fact that it actually does still have the same functioning and functionality on the date that the original Oceans did. So those are the basic specs of the watch. It is a fantastic strap on this. I got to tell you, like I've said lately, Sturmanskie has really upped their strap game. A heavily padded, really nice strap. And one of the things I really like about it is these do come with the deployant clasp, which is great on the leather. It allows for the leather to stay stable much longer. I do like that there's a little bit of guilloche in there on the inside of the deployant. I get a kick out of things that really only the owner of the watch are going to see when they're decorated, like things on the insides of case backs and so forth like that. Now, I mentioned that I was going to go into the history of the watch, and it really is a rich history. The Aero watch, or Strela, was the watch that was the watch of choice for a lot of cosmonauts until the Ocean came along and basically took over for it. In 1976, the Sturmanskie created the Ocean strictly for the Russian Navy. It was issued to officers. There were a number of places that the watch was used. It was a common naval watch after it was produced in 1976. Now, you may think that's a strange kind of, wait a minute, how do we make the leap from this being the Ocean and being a naval watch to space? Well, first of all, it's important to point out that not every cosmonaut or astronaut in the U.S., for that matter, comes from the Air Force. There are also naval pilots that end up being in the space service as well. So that's one thing to point out about that. And also, it's all connected to the military. So this became a very popular watch, particularly because of the fact that it was an elapsed time chronograph watch. It became a very popular watch to be used in space. And mechanical watches, actually, as was learned from the Gagarin flight and from many other flights, perform extremely well in zero gravity and among the other factors that can affect any mechanical or other material or other instrumentation that you may be using in space travel. This was, again, the 3133. This is a 23 jewel timepiece, and it was, again, became the staple movement when the Ocean was released. Now, interestingly enough, only 9 years later, the Russian government actually allowed Sturmanskie to release the Ocean to the public, and then it became a watch that you could actually buy as a private citizen, as opposed to being only a military timepiece, although it did remain military grade when it was released to the public. Now, it has gone up in many Russian space explorations. People have been wearing the Ocean. I'm going to show some pictures in the video of the folks that wear them, and I'm going to get this name right. One of the first Japanese space tourists. I'm going to butcher his name, I'm sure. Toyohiro Akayami. He wore this watch into space. Among many other Russian cosmonauts were wearing the Ocean into space. Now, it's interesting. This was based on, the 3133 was based on the 7734 movement, which actually the Russian watch industry bought the equipment and the rights to use that movement from Switzerland. They made some changes to the movement, and then it became, again, the staple movement for chronographs among Russian timekeeping. Prior to that was the 3017, which was the movement that was in the Strela. Now, that was a cam-driven chronograph, and it was a much more expensive movement to make. The 3133 actually added shock resistance for the first time, which had not been in there before. While actually in some ways a more complex and more robust movement, it was actually less expensive to make, which made it more affordable, particularly when they released it to the public. So if you want to have something that is truly a part of Russian horological history, by the way, we have two styles here. It's really just a matter of taste. I tend to like the blue on the left. I just like that sweep, the way they created this almost hourglass look there between the bicomplexes, but there's also the gray on the right. They both actually are equally popular. I found that not one sells more or less than the other. It's just a matter of taste. So those are your two colors. So now if you want something that is truly a piece of Russian space history and a world space history for that matter, as I said, you had international people wearing these watches into space. The Sturmanskie Ocean 1976 reissue is definitely something you want to have in your collection. Only 200 made for the world. These are not going to last very long. If you don't have a 3133 or a 31 caliber movement watch in your collection and you are a fan of Russian watches, you absolutely must pick up one of these, because this is something that every Russian watch collector should have, at least one 31 caliber watch in their collection. And this is a way to get one that's brand new. You know that the movement is new old stock. You know that it has been perfectly serviced by Russian watchmakers in Moscow. So this is your chance to really own another piece of history. If you have a Gagarin, and then if you have a Gagarin, Strela, Ocean, it is a natural progression. It's something that I'll put it this way: I have a Gagarin, I have a Strela, I have an Ocean. It is something that is absolutely essential to any Russian watch collector's collection. So there you have it. This is the 31 caliber Russian Sturmanskie, or as someone corrected me the other day, yes, it is Sturmanskie, and I'm sure I'm still butchering it. I make no pretense to be someone who speaks Russian well. I know I'm giving the American pronunciation of Sturmanskie when I talk about the watches. Even they don't correct us. They know that's how Americans tend to pronounce the name of the brand. Again, this is the Sturmanskie 3133 Ocean Chronograph 1976 reissue, just out now. If you want one, grab it, because they're going to be gone. And when they're gone, I can't tell you if or when or ever will Sturmanskie re-release the Ocean chronograph. Until next time, I'm Craig Hester with R2AWatches.com. And hey, keep watching.